at the heart of it, where I kind of started that last slide is the switch. All of your camera gear ties into that. So all the cameras talk to a base station, and or in the case of our 21 camera, it just goes straight into a switch. All of your control panels tie into that. So really everything speaking directly to that switch. And really, when it comes down to it, although everything does have an IP address, there's a couple different ways of setting up that network. We use we normally use what we call auto mode, which essentially depends on the ability of most of devices to self-assign an address if there's no DHCP server. Once a device self-assigns, everything we do is all about camera numbers. So you'll see over on the left, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 98, 99. Those are the camera numbers. And really all you as an operator care about is that camera number. The IP address that sits in the background literally is just a background thing that is not really relevant to the operator. This thing that just came up on the right-hand side is the CCS1. That is the replacement of our MCP that we'll be talking about. It also ties into the C2IP network. And then, so if you think about it, if camera numbers really are all what everything is about, if you've got 2 cameras with the same number, or in this case, 4 cameras with 2 of the same numbers, that's not going to work because you've got a conflict. All you've got to do though is just simply change that identifier at one of those cameras, and you'll eliminate any issues and you're good to go. And again, all you really care about is those camera numbers. Excuse me. So yeah, we have our new cameras down the bottom left of the 100 series, which are 2110 native. They really talk directly to a switch, and then that switch takes care of managing, or you manage all your signals through that. As part of that connectivity, the control network is actually put onto a VLAN within the media network that is going to and from the cameras, and then that VLAN basically gets routed out by the switches as it's identified as that VLAN is identified with flag to send it off and put it back into the C2IP area that's local to that switch. Yeah, just like everything else, IP is really becoming the core to much of what we're doing now and going forward. So creative rating, really, where this all comes from historically. Well, I mean, as you can see in this picture, and we're not going to claim that either of us are one of those people, but both of us are kind of old enough to be there just about. At least I am. You had a single operator running a single camera, and you had 4, 5, 6 cameras on a studio floor, 6 being a significant amount at the time. Since those days, let's just say things have changed dramatically. At the time, it really was much more a job of getting the camera turned on and keeping it looking halfway decent throughout the show. Nowadays, you're dealing with really just a plethora of functions and capabilities. And, a lot of what is being done by a camera shader now is you've got the technical side of it, the engineering side of it, but you've also got the creative, artistic side of it. And trying to merge that together into a new control system is really what this new environment is all about. With all the new functions, HDR, wide color gamut, UHD, and not so long ago HD, that makes a significant difference. But also, in a more general sense, we're dealing with a lot more stuff in a lot less time with a lot less people, and relatively speaking, less money. I mean, in some ways, the money is up higher, but then again, the money doesn't go as far as it used to. So all of these things are kind of fighting against you, and having that control system that gives you full flexibility and capabilities is really what this is all about. Our development folks went around and talked to a lot of customers, came up with a whole bunch of mock-ups and such. None of these panels that we're looking at here were actually active, like real panels, I don't think, but maybe here and there.
No.
A lot of interactive work was done with folks, literally from basic piece of paper of like, okay, tell us what you want, what you would expect a control panel to be. After a whole lot of work, what they came up with is the CGP 500. It is really a cool thing, but the single most important thing I'd like you to take home about this is that it really is no function that is more than one touch away. And as I sort of jumped forward a little bit, that's basically done by the fact that the panel is programmable, something like a video game controller. And there are 3 pages of settings, and you can move forward or backwards through those 3 pages. So really, if you know your setting is on the 3rd page, you can go backwards from page 1 to page 3, or forward from page 2 to page 3 to get to that setting. And so everything, literally everything you've set up on that panel is no more than 1 touch away. So the elements of our creative grading system, at the heart of it is the CCS1, which is really nothing much more than a sort of small, yes, and Kevin is showing you the wonderful box in his camera view. And let me just bring that up full screen for a second. I think that should be full screen, I think. So yeah, the CCS1, it's basically a Windows 10 IoT computer. One of the key things about it is it's got 2 IP ports on the back. One of them is quote unquote public. One of them is quote unquote private, as in the C2 IP network. That private side is really designed for the actual camera network itself. And then the public side is really for other systems and people like us to interact with the system. So that's actually how you will access the creative grading environment, which we'll be talking about. That's how a switcher would actually access the camera environment for triggering tally over Ethernet. And there's some other stuff that is also available via that public side. The creative grading panel, which we already talked about, one of the nice things about this new panel is it's PoE, so power over Ethernet, so you don't need to have a separate little 12-volt power supply for it, although you can use one if you would prefer, or if it ends up being a necessity for whatever reason. But basically, it's just a single Ethernet cable with power on that Ethernet for hooking up and powering the control panel. A nice little addition to it is I will have to go backwards a little bit and say that I've been doing system cameras now for a little more than a year and a couple of months. And one of the things that I learned pretty quickly was our original control panel, which I don't actually have in front of me right now, but it was actually just a tiny touch too big to fit into the desk space that other control panels or some other control panels were designed to fit into. And this one is just enough smaller, so that's not an issue anymore, which really actually made quite a few people happy. Anyway, moving on to the third and in some ways almost the most important element is the creative grading application itself. And I notice I still need to fix this slide because my second image is hiding behind the first one. It's not supposed to be there, but anyway, the creative grading application is an environment that really every shading person should have, and because you can have multiple instances of it, everyone can have access to it, presuming they should have access to it. It should be on the KVM back in the rack room, that kind of thing, etc. And it gives you full access to all of the cameras in every way, shape, or form, including menu access to both the base stations if you're using base stations, as well as the camera viewfinder menus if you need to access that environment. But all it is an HTML5 page. So whether if you're running it on an iPad or an Android tablet, for example, all that app does is really provide a frame for the application and the ability to assign the IP address for where that application lives. But you can run it up onto any browser that is HTML5 compliant. So, Chrome or Edge or Firefox or Brave, etc. And obviously, it can be run. It is designed for a touchscreen, so that's really the nicer way to run it. So the control panel itself, I mentioned a minute ago, it's kind of like a video game controller in that you can really assign functions to the various controls that really meet your particular needs for a particular show. Let me take that one step further on the sort of user profile side, which we'll get into more later on when we actually get into the setup of the system. But there are 2 sets of user profiles. There's an actual user profile that's the panel configuration. So where you want to have master black, for example, that sort of thing. And we'll talk about how you go about setting that up. But there's also a separate profile for the workstation position. So the actual shader position. So where you have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 control panels, that desk space has a profile to it, so you can very quickly change between which cameras are assigned there, etc. And we'll be talking a lot more about that as we go forward. But both of those sets of profiles can be saved and recalled, named, etc. So anyway, so going back to the control panel, again, there's basically 33 assignable controls spread across 3 pages. Right, so let me just switch on to the next thing. We'll kind of get into a little bit of detail. Come on, let's change. Okay. So if you look at the left-hand side of this display panel, you'll see the highlights are a little bit brighter. So this top one is a toggle button that pushes up and down. Then the bottom 2, or the lower 2, which is actually that same button, is a rotary and a rotary below it. That matches up on the right-hand side on the control panel to this button up on top, which is a push button and a rotary and a rotary. And then on the right-hand side, you've got the same push button, rotary and rotary. In the middle, you've got 2 push buttons that can be assigned for whatever functions you want. They're toggle buttons. And then you've got some rotaries on the main joystick, which are, again, you can see these highlights here that are identifying which ones are doing what. So in this case, master black is on my top one, shadows are on the second one, and 4K details on the third one. And that matches up. Oops, sorry about that. Matches up onto here. This is the top rotary, the middle rotary, and the lower rotary. And just for kicks, let me just point that out a little bit closer if I can. Where is that? Let's do that. And let's do this. Hopefully that brings that. Does that bring that full screen by any chance?
No.
It does not. Huh, that's too bad. So I actually have to stop sharing to do that. All right, let me go ahead and do that. So maybe it is now full screen?
Yes.
Okay. So looking at the control panel itself, this is the push button we're talking about, and it's also a rotary. This is also a rotary here. And again, there's knobs on the other side of the exact same thing. Down on the joystick here, again, a rotary up on top, a rotary in the middle, and a rotary down below. And then again, these 2 buttons. So those are all programmable buttons that can be saved and recalled for different functions, different shows. And the idea being that, for example, you're working on a football game, outdoors, and you need completely different settings than you would necessarily need for an indoor studio show with 4 cameras that is very static. So yeah, we should be looking at the slides again.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So yes. So it's an application that runs on various things. It's kind of a duplicate of what I was just talking about. The interface does really give you some very useful graphical user readouts, if I can call them that, of sort of really what the camera is doing, so you can see it. So in this particular case, we're looking at the light as it's passing through the camera. So it comes in the front end, and then as it goes through, it can get changed by different functions. So the first step is the iris. You've got the ND filters that can increase or decrease the amount of light coming through. Exposure control will decrease light going through and affect it. And then you've got gain, which can affect it as well. And we'll get into some of the nice features that this also can supply to you. And the CGA system, the creative grading system, really gives you a lot of access both to your cameras as well as to, obviously, again, managing your setups and that sort of thing. I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody so we can, if I can. Yes. Yes. Okay. Hopefully we're all muted now. And hopefully you can still hear me. Yes, you should still be able to hear me. Okay. One of the really nice things, well, partially because of these graphical screens that we have, it makes things much more understandable. It really brings things to life in terms of what you're actually doing. Kevin will be pointing out the help functions, the description functions that are built into the system that can also really help folks like myself really understand what different functions do. And it really can really support your shaders as they're moving forward. Again, this is all really supported by the CCS1. That's really where the web pages are being served up from. It is also the MCP. So you have a multi-view and a single view. Down in the bottom left, you can see single view over on the far left, and then multi-view. We're in multi-view mode now in this screen. So it gives you access to be able to address multiple cameras simultaneously. So for example, in this particular case, we could adjust the white balance just of camera 5, but if we chose to, we could actually select the entire column and adjust the white balance of all those cameras simultaneously while maintaining the offset that is on that you see on those pages between those different color temperatures. So it gives you quite a bit of flexibility on that level in terms of really mastering and controlling multiple cameras. And it offers a whole bunch of other stuff that Kevin will get into on the practical side of things. Again, very important, you can have unlimited instances of this application running. So really, it should be everywhere. So if you've got 3 or 4 or 5 shading positions, every single one of those should have a touch panel or some sort of way of getting into that application. You know, the EIC, there should be access to it, you know, from wherever they are. There should be access from the engineering spaces, wherever there's KVMs, that sort of thing. Really, literally anywhere that someone might have a need to touch a camera, that application can be available. Yeah, it is entirely on the network. So looking at the network structure again, hang on 1 second. I'm going to change this back before I forget. So at the core of it, again, is really the C2 IP network, which is really that switch, which actually can of course be multiple switches, and all of your camera gear, whether the cameras, base stations, control panels, the CCS1, that is all tied together on the C2 IP network. And then again, there's that public side of the CCS1, which allows access to various functionalities on that C2 IP network for accessing cameras, changing settings, running tally, etc. So again, switchers would talk to the camera network over this routed via the server. A wireless router, for example, can be tied into it, which then gives you wireless access to the creative grading application. And really where that can get interesting and really nice is, you know, most typically you've got a whole bunch of people in the studio talking about stuff that's there. You've got this poor person back in a dark room someplace who's trying to understand what they're talking about and trying to sort of make changes based on the things they're asking for, but not really getting the full picture. So in this case, you can actually go in the same space, be with all those people, the lighting director, the producer, the director, etc., and really drive all your cameras from there and really work on different settings, you know, with everyone in the same space, looking at the same live stuff. So it really, it's makes things really a lot better. So yeah, you can use the creative grading application standalone. It could just be just that. Again, you know, you can walk into the studio and do that. Really, the best combination is having both of them. And this is not only because they kind of do different things, but they also tie together and actually work synchronously with each other. And we'll be showing you that a little bit later on as well. You can gain access. I mean, it's actually, I have to say, I've recently looked, and both on the Android side and on the Apple side, it's much easier to find now than it used to be. But if you'd like to download the creative grading application, you can scan this QR code. It'll bring you to a page where you can choose either the Apple Store or the Android store. Now, obviously, you can't do much, or you can't do really anything with the application without being on a C2 IP network. But you know, if you've got it on hand, if you know you're sort of going to be, you know, potentially in that kind of an environment, having it already on hand, you know, is never a bad idea. So that's the QR code. If you want, we can bring that back. We can bring that back up later on if there's some interest for it.
You're using the wrong QR code again, my friend.
I thought I swear I updated this.
Anyway, it will work.
It will work. These are the correct codes, but we have a different page that brings you to a landing page to take you to the right place, and I don't understand what happened here. But anyway, okay. Another thing that is extremely useful is all of the software updates, etc., user manuals, service manuals, customer service bulletins, etc., are available on a public page. This is for the camera gear. That's what this QR code will give you a link to. If you have, Grass Valley camera gear and are always kind of wondering, like, where do we get these updates from? This is the place. It's very useful that it's just a public page. It is not the best set of pages, I will have to say, but they're there. Okay, so if you want to bring that back up later again, we can do that. This is not really what I needed to be bringing up. I must have changed this thing for some reason. I don't know why, but anyway. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing and move through a couple of slides here and see if I can figure out what's going on. So I've got, actually that was it really. I've just got a whole bunch of outlines for some other stuff. And then I've got a lovely Q&A slide, which I will not bother flashing back up on the screen. But I will verbally say, if there are questions, sort of initial overview kind of stuff, that kind of thing, or whatever, please now bring them up. And how are you doing? Well, okay. Yes, I will say yes and no. Realistically, there really should not be an installation that doesn't have a CCS1 available. That's really the bottom line. Having said that, if you have set up a control panel, it will remember the last settings that it was given, and you could connect it to a camera and drive it. But you won't be able to access any other settings, that are available on the camera on that control panel, because they are, if they were not originally assigned to that particular user setting set. So on a theoretical level, yes, you could run, a camera or multiple cameras without the CCS1, but it really would not be a good idea. Yeah, does that kind of answer the question?
So you're not supposed to actually log on to the CCS1 itself on operational side, right? So for the engineering side, to set up the equipment once to get it up and running, yes. But from the operational point of view, you should not use the CCS1 itself. In fact, there is a lot of things which you cannot even open from the CCS1 itself. So the idea behind is that you're using a tablet or any type of HTML5 capable device, so PC, MacBooks, any type of mobile phones whatsoever, and connect it to the public side of the things. And from there, you actually connect via the IP address to that server. But you're not using the server itself as the device to drive that stuff. You're welcome.
Having said all that, I mean, do you have access and basic communication going between the public side and the private side? Like, can you access the creative grading application and stuff yet?
Yeah, okay. I think that's a different subject here right now, because that's really going more into the engineering kind of things. And I will actually dive into a couple of these questions from the operational point of view. So let us first finish actually the standard portion of this training, which is really for operators. And there might be some engineers listening right now and says, no, don't tell this to all of the operators. They should not do this. Right? So that's why I also wanted to raise something Dane has shown, where you find the software. But we seriously emphasize, talk to your engineering team. Don't stop uploading anything. Dane, I think you should probably take this slide out. I'm absolutely not happy about it. It's for operators. It's not engineering over here. But that's a different subject. So I want to highlight this really. You can get in real trouble if someone like a normal regular operator starts fiddling around with software. And then at the end, it's the equipment which is failing, and then it's Grass Valley which is failing. And that's what I don't want when engineering is not involved. Anyway, more questions. I'm sorry. Is it Van? If I'm
Van. Yeah.
Yeah,
No, we can maybe get into some of that at the end. But in any case,
Yep.
Van, we can get on the line. So really, we're talking. That's really more of a commissioning and system setup question, which is sort of separate and apart from actually driving creative grading. So we can deal with that either here or offline afterwards. More questions? Okay. Well, while we're maybe waiting for somebody to sort of be bold and ask a question, I'm going to suggest that we take a couple of minutes so I can run and grab myself something to drink. Does anybody have a particular feeling about whether it should be just 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 1 minute?
Should we say 1:15? We continue. That's 7 minutes.
Sure. That works.
Okay.
All right. Well, I am going